Otis Rowley, Brittany Morgan, and Malika Burgos Flores, thanks so much for joining us. In this conversation, I kind of want to take a look at how money is trickling into cities, certainly in the wake of the pandemic and the economic opportunities that need to be sort of restarted. And so let me start kind of from the top of this, where the financial institutions are concerned. And Otis, I want to start with you. Now, you have, along with Wells Fargo, made a significant commitment to a number of cities. Tell me a little bit about the Open for Business Fund.
Sure. Ultimately, we know that the only way that you're going to kind of jumpstart the economy is by investing in small business. We know that entrepreneurship and small business is really how you build generational wealth. And when we look at what was happening even before the pandemic, there was just a gap in terms of people of color and women. And so after the pandemic, it was that much worse. And so we wanted to address that. And Open for Business directly puts over $420 million focused in and on small business creation. We focused in on cities and those individuals who were being left behind. And because ultimately, if you're talking about job growth and the way that we were going to kind of really try to jumpstart the economy, we saw that this was the path forward.
So Otis, how much are you talking about in terms of Miami? What's your commitment been so far, or how long do you expect it to take?
Sure. So it's a $20 million grant to Miami. How long it will take will really ultimately kind of depend on how quickly those dollars are able to move and how methodological and strategic we are in terms of really doing the outreach. We have a fantastic partner, obviously, in and through the Miami Foundation, and Brittany will be able to kind of talk to you a little bit more about how they're deploying that capital. But it's $20 million focused in the Miami market.
Okay, Otis is doing my job for me. That's a perfect transition to you, Brittany. So how does the Miami Foundation work with capital, say, that's coming from the likes of Wells Fargo? And then what do you do? What's the next step in this chain?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Hari. And first of all, I want to thank you for having us, representing the foundation and the Miami market. The goal of the Miami Foundation is truly to build a more resilient and a more equitable greater Miami. And so, of course, the mission of Open for Business aligns so closely with our mission. Truly, we see this as a moment for the Community Foundation to be an intermediary between our donor, Wells Fargo, and the community, and specifically the community of minority small business owners that Otis mentioned. Miami is one of the most entrepreneurial cities in the US. We also have a majority foreign born population. So, what that means is that you have street corners that are lined with entrepreneurs, immigrant led businesses, Black led businesses. And coming out of the pandemic, they're really feeling the hit a lot more than others. And so, as stewards of this grant, what we've done is a concerted community engagement process with folks like Mileka Burgos Flores, who represents the Allapattah community. And we took a concerted effort to listen to our shopkeepers, listen to our community stakeholders, and get an idea of what it is that they really need in this moment coming out of the pandemic, and how we can guide those 20 million to help support kind of their dreams and resilience.
So, Malika, here you are on the sort of third step of this chain. For people who are perhaps watching this in the Northeast or other parts of the country, tell us a little bit about your organization and the community that it serves.
Sure. So I am the founder and chief executive officer of the Alapata Collaborative CDC. We are a place-based Main Street community. We focus on number one, preventing the displacement that is happening so rapidly in Miami, in communities of color like Alapata. Preventing the displacement and rooting the small businesses in place is our number one goal this year and until we achieve it, right? So what we do the best is working with the small businesses, working within our commercial corridor, and taking those businesses, especially after the pandemic, into not only digital inclusion and business sustainability and ensuring their resilience, but also working with them and their banking institution, banking sometimes because many of these businesses were not bankable, they were not banking. They were keeping notebooks instead of QuickBooks or any other type of digital accounting system. So really bringing their business up to general accounting practices and making sure that they have the banking pro forma and financials ready so they can actually own their storefront. The Open for Business grant is going to be an amazing tool. It is an amazing tool for us because we are now working with the small businesses so they can own that storefront, but not only their storefront, the means of productions, which is many times what keeps them lagging behind is because they don't own the means of production.
So Otis, the challenges that Malika is kind of pointing out with some of these small business owners, some of this is structural, some of this is generational, some of this is kind of education. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that these structural barriers exist for someone to even access the capital. So what do you do from the financial institution down to make sure that there is an opportunity for those people who might not consider walking into an institution and saying, hey, I need a loan?
Well, the first way that you get to the solution is really is to admit that there's a problem, right? And to recognize that there are structural barriers that were keeping many people of color and women from access to capital, and many of those were very intentional. And so we have to be as intentional in providing those solutions. So for Wells Fargo, with a goal in and around kind of preserving and uplifting small businesses, because we know that their health, their economic health and well-being is going to be the economic health and well-being of those families in the community. It's good business sense, right? The healthier they are, the more bankable they are, the more likely they are to go with Wells Fargo, et cetera. And so ultimately for us, it's number one, recognizing the problem and then having real strategic solutions in doing that. So when we did Open for Business, we were really intentional in terms of making sure it was a partnership. And that's why we went to various cities where we saw that people had boots on the ground, where they recognized that it was about access to capital. It was around financial health and literacy. It was really about connecting the dots between those individuals who needed the capital and getting them the skills and resources they needed to access that capital. And so for us, we recognize there's a role that we can play, but it's a small part of the overall solution. And that's why it's so great to be in partnership with Malika and with Brittany and recognizing not just here in Miami, but around the country, that the only way we're going to get to fixing the problem is by doing it in partnership.
Brittany, how do you identify the different types of organizations that are those boots on the ground that Otis is referencing? How do you make sure that, most people around the country might not know the Allapattah neighborhood or Little Haiti in Miami. So how do you figure out, okay, which are the community-based organizations that are there that have the respect and the contacts and the connections to have the credibility, frankly, to be able to go to small business owners and say, this is legitimate, this is a good program, and that you should apply for it?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Hari. And I think the role of being a community foundation allows us to have already been in community and in contact with these organizations. We have an annual citywide fundraising initiative, Give Miami Day. We offer an annual community grants process. So we kind of already knew who those key partners are. Each of our communities has a stronghold. They have a wraparound services organization. It was really incumbent on us then to reach out to them and say, what are you hearing from your small businesses? What do they need in this moment? Sitting down around the table, sitting down for breakfast, visiting with the tailor and the shops on Mileka's, neighborhood corridors. It was really those conversations that allowed us to direct resources towards them. And I do want to pick up on this thread between, capital and know-how. We completely acknowledge that it will take a lot more than grants and loans and commercial down payment assistance to root businesses, and that technical assistance, that investment in skills transfer, consulting, etc. It's just kind of a perfect match, and you really see some growth, truly sustained growth, when you have that symbiotic blend of capital and technical assistance.
Malika, what are some of the challenges that the small business owners are facing now? Obviously, everybody's trying to recover and rebuild after the pandemic, but what are the kind of other forces that are in Miami and that are in the Allapattah neighborhood that we might not be familiar with?
Well, I think that there's a force that people are not realizing, and it's that when we talk about displacement, many people think that it's because sea level rise and, people that live in the coastal areas of Miami want to move inland, and that can be true. But the real reason that I see is the multinational corporations that are buying up real estate and holding real estate and letting this real estate be vacant, letting this real estate be blight in our community. Now we don't have, John Smith, the landlord. Now we have whatever name LLC, really being the owner. So you have a property manager maybe that probably lives in South Florida, not necessarily Miami, picking up rent or dealing with landlord issues. And really, you don't have a landlord that really cares about the community, being the person who is, the landlord, and that can actually say to that the businesses can say, I want to buy from you. It's a totally different ball game. So not only that, but these national big corporations use AI software to figure out what is the best rent to charge. And they really take the middleman out. They take the humanity out of this. And that is a big issue. And this is not only happening in La Para, this is happening nationwide.
So, Brittany, I want to get back to you here in this. So, how do you, when you hear this from the community organizations that you're working with, what's a lever that you can pull either at the county level or the city level as a significant foundation, but also as an institution that has connections with donors throughout the city?
That's a really excellent question, and actually one of the most novel, in my opinion, capital products coming out of our Open for Business rollout in Miami is our commercial real estate down payment assistance program. When we went on those aforementioned listening tours, we heard so much about there's leaseholders who are paying much more than they could in a monthly mortgage. They're the ones doing the leaseholder improvements to their space. They're putting in the sweat equity, and then the landlords are subsequently raising the rent after they made improvements to that space. So what we realize is that we can really be that conduit and provide that upfront down payment capital, really help connect small businesses to, for instance, mortgage lenders, to real estate agents, and really help them kind of share in that American dream on the commercial end. You hear so much about first-time home buyer programs. You're hearing a lot about housing affordability right now, but that issue is just as salient for commercial renters. And so we're offering, and specifically to collaboratives of 2 or more businesses, so that we can put forward shared equity models, community land trusts, and really try to root these legacy businesses. If you've been operating your tailor shop for 10, 20 years on the same street, let's give them an opportunity to own that facility, and then I'll start to have some of that wealth and equity appreciation that comes along with ownership.
Yeah, go ahead, Otis.
Oh no, I'm sorry, I'm getting all excited. But it's part of the reason I'm excited because that's what's really powerful about the flexibility of these dollars, right? When you work in partnership with community foundations like the Miami Foundation, they can meet the needs as they are. So we're not being prescriptive. And so you have micro grants, you have the commercial down payment assistance. You be able to be flexible and meet the true needs or at the street level, so we can really start investing and building assets in the way that these small businesses then can create the jobs and opportunities that we know that they are ready and willing and able to do if they have the right tools and if they have the assets to build those, to build up the businesses.
And I think I want to add something else to that. I think that what this program does, and I have seen it, is that when we told the businesses about this program and we held an info session to talk about Open for Business, they were excited. It was really emotional because they see that people are listening and that we're not just working, but that the information is coming down. And it's something very intangible that it creates. And it's that opportunity to dream. It's that opportunity to truly believe that the American dream is at your hands reach. That all these years of sweat equity and work and all these things that you want to do for your family are actually possible. Because now you're going to take, and I'm not even kidding, that $15,000 a month that you're paying in rent for a small business, or even, some of them went from paying $1,200 to paying $2,200 in a matter of 2-3 years. So the increase of rent was unfounded. It was really a lot of speculations. So now that they see this possibility, we are creating, we are calling them, investor groups. And we already have teams of 3 businesses coming together to own their storefront. And they're working on their finances. They're coming together. We're going to be investing with them. So we're going to be part of all all the teams to make sure that they have this community land trust model really well done. Because aside from helping them own their storefront, we also want to keep affordability in the community. So the moment that they decide, you know what, I'm done with this business, I need to move on, they can sell it to their employees. So we could do some worker-owned co-ops. But the place is going to remain in the community. That legacy business, aside from belonging to the owner, it also belongs to the community. That third space will continue to stay in the community.
No, Brittany, it's interesting when I hear Malika and Otis talking about this. It seems like, some of us are aware about the cost that the Great Recession had in the residential housing market and how it disproportionately affected people of color, African American families as well, and that source of intergenerational wealth was, decimated for Black households compared to the rest of the country. And what we're starting to describe and what we're hearing kind of in this conversation is that there's essentially been something similar happening in the commercial market as well, that real estate is part of that intergenerational wealth transfer. And we don't really think about it that much because a lot of times I think people think of a small business often connected to something bigger, and that's not really how everything works.
Yeah, that's a really, really fair comparison. I think, when you think about what it takes to build wealth and to build assets, you typically think of one's home, one's retirement accounts, one's business. The great thing about small business is that it is such an equalizer. You don't necessarily need a post-secondary degree to operate a successful business. You don't necessarily need to be a U.S. citizen. So how can we take that dream of owning your own business and make it even grander, such as owning the place where you operate? I can't tell you the number of folks that I met with this year who told me that they started with an empty warehouse, they turned it into a co-working space for different artists, and once the landlord saw it, they swooped it right from under their feet. I've seen people who have put, their blood, sweat, and tears into a hair salon, did all of the plumbing themselves, and then again, the landlord has decided, that's a great salon. You know what? I'm going to rent it to somebody for twice as much. And so you hear these stories and it's heartbreaking, but at the same time, like Malika said, we're giving people so much hope. I have similarly heard from folks who are struggling with the affordability issues in South Florida right now that they've never had conversations like this with a funder, with the opportunity to own their own space, to build it out and truly make it theirs. And I do want to put in a note that this isn't just our small businesses for profit. We're also extending these opportunities to nonprofit organizations in South Florida, many of whom are similarly rent burdened. They're coming up against the end of their 5 or 10-year lease. And so this is definitely an opportunity to kind of turn this moment of housing inaffordability and supply chain tension and really turn it into something great that they can own in perpetuity.
Otis, what does a bank get out of this? Or why does a lending institution or a financial institution, why should they be participating in a program like this or start something like this in a different city?
To use a highly technical term, it's a no-brainer, right? Ultimately, for us, the stronger that the families and the communities are, the stronger our bank is going to be. That's why we really don't even think of this as a donation or a grant. It's really an investment. It's an investment in the communities that we're a part of. Ultimately, the more jobs that you create, the more generational wealth that you create, and if you do that in partnership, there's loyalty, there's brand loyalty, there's bank loyalty, there's family loyalty, right? And so ultimately, for us as a bank, as an institution who's part of the Miami community, who's part of the larger U.S. community, we just see this as an investment that's really going to help to build up those families, build up those individuals, build up those communities for the long haul. And that's why when you hear about us, not just in terms of small business, but also nonprofits, because those investments actually create jobs, which benefit families and communities, right? And so it's a bigger picture perspective. It's very strategic. I wish I could say it was for moral or emotional reasons. There's an economic interest to do the right thing. And we are very interested in continuing to do the right thing, not just in Miami, but around the nation.
Malika, Miami has these distinct cultural neighborhoods that have their own histories and their own sort of, linguistic roots. It might be from a particular neighborhood in Central or South America or from Haiti or the Caribbean. And I wonder, what's the direct impact that these communities feel when we have kind of structural inequities and who has access to capital, who has access to start a small business? Well, when you drive through sections of Miami that are doing better than others, what are the things that you notice?
It's a very clear message. We don't deserve the better things. um, because, you drive through a wealthy neighborhood and then you cross a specific street and you walk into one that is more disinvested. Specifically in Alapata, it's a community that has been disinvested for over 40 years. It predates the city of Miami incorporation 40 years as well. And what I see is that in our community, it's one of the parts in the city of Miami that has residential, commercial, and industrial. We're right next to the Miami River, so the economic opportunity and the resilience of these businesses and these families is remarkable. The amount of money and really benefit that it provides to the city of Miami is really one of the greatest ones within all the neighborhoods within Miami. However, it's not the one that gets the investment that it needs. And I'll give you an example. Alapata is one of the highest elevations in Miami. However, it floods. It doesn't flood because of its elevation. It floods because its draining system needs to be updated. We have a lot of businesses, but we don't have fiber optic. It's little things like that. Well, they seem little, but they're really not. They really send a message to where should things be? Where should things, who should have the nicer things in our community? And I don't think that should be. And then one last thing that is very, well, it could seem simple, but it's making a big impact, not only in the economy, but in the health of our community, is the heat. We have heat islands because there's so much concrete and lack of trees, and it's that beautification process that usually happens with the grass and the trees that is not happening in our community. Well, guess what? It's not just beautification, it's also climate mitigation that helps us have a cooler area, and it actually allows people to walk the sidewalks and go into these businesses. But if it's so hot, you're going to get out of your car, get what you need, and leave. Right? Or even don't even come around. So it's a lot more than what meets the eye, and those are things that through our Main Street approach we're really working on.
Yeah, Brittany, what's interesting is that these infrastructure concerns that Malika is bringing up. I mean, if you're one of the highest points in the city, in a city like Miami, it should be one of the most desirable pieces of land given sea level rise, right? But if your plumbing infrastructure, your broadband infrastructure isn't there, then it automatically kind of falls off your radar. That's not necessarily a zip code that I want to build my dream home in.
Yeah, I think that's a real good observation, and there's a couple things at play. I mean, Alapata, Mileka may have mentioned it, its adjacency to downtown and its adjacency to up-and-coming neighborhoods like Wynwood and the Design District. They're already experiencing that encroachment, right? When those adjacent areas become too unaffordable, what is the next closest area for folks to move into, whether that be investors, speculators, what have you. I do actually want to call attention to our neighborhood approach for Open for Business in Miami. While our grants and loan products are available to any small business or nonprofit county-wide, we've actually chosen a handful of communities where this commercial real estate investment is only going to be feasible. We didn't want to necessarily continue to further these inequities and help, businesses in some of Miami's most affluent areas afford their own real estate. Instead, we're doubling down on areas like Alapata, areas like Liberty City, Little Haiti, Miami Gardens, Opa-locka, Homestead. If you spent any time in South Florida, you kind of know where these areas are and their traditional residents. And this is really our way of putting kind of a stake in the ground and saying that these communities do matter. This is where we'd like to further our investments and make sure that areas like Alapata that are at the greatest risk of displacement and encroachment, that the folks who helped build those communities up from the beginning can also experience some of those gains. And on the resilience front, I would be remiss not to mention our many other collective impact initiatives at the foundation. We have a Miami Connected initiative that seeks to bring broadband to all households and families free of charge. We have a Resilient 305 initiative started through 100 Resilient Cities that really seeks to kind of help insulate communities from the urban heat island effect, help prevent sea level rise, et cetera, and really just create a stronger Miami, whether that's on an economic dimension or a climate one, or even with regard to kind of the digital skills divide as well.
I guess a question for all of you. Let me start with you, Otis. The forum is about rebuilding cities, and for each of you, what does an inclusive economy look like? What's the call to action that's necessary to get us toward whatever that goal is for you?
Well, I think we begin at dispelling the myth that we have to start all over again, meaning that the communities need to be erased and then rebuilt. I think that is a myth. It's a lie that's been promulgated not just in Miami, but around the country. I think the way that we rebuild our communities is by doing both bringing in new investment and simultaneously investing in those who are there, right? Building up the communities, the businesses, the residents that were already there, while simultaneously bringing in new investments. And it doesn't have to be a battle royale. It doesn't have to be this or that. It can be both. And it can be done strategically and thoughtfully and with innovation. But it can only be done in partnership. And that's part of why we're excited about Open for Business. We're excited about this partnership in Miami because it's truly that approach. But I think if you're having a conversation about rebuilding, it has to be how do you do both of those things at the same time? And at Wells Fargo, we're committed to both. Of course, we want new customers, but we're committed to our current customers as well, right? And I think if you do both of those things simultaneously, you have a stronger community and a stronger America.
Brittany, how about you?
Yeah, it's a really fair question. And what I'll say is that we are rebuilding, but I think we've all learned coming out of the pandemic that opportunity is not distributed equally. And if we don't center equity in our rebuilding strategy, we're going to go down a lot of the same paths that we have in the past. This initiative centers Black and Latino-led small businesses. If you look at some of the wealth disparities in South Florida, despite being a majority Latino city, non-Latino whites still have greater wealth and assets than Latinos. And especially if you compare that to some of our Black peers, Caribbean Black Americans, for example, we're not doing very well at all. And so we're centering race in this initiative. We are definitely trying to go boldly to kind of rectify some of these disparities. And in order to rebuild properly, you do need to center equity at the core of all that you do.
Hear, hear.
Malika, how about you?
Totally agree with what Otis mentioned and Brittany, but I think that I think I would go back and say that in order to do what Otis and Brittany mentioned, we need to look at the programs and policies that we have. We need policies that are going to protect renters, that are going to protect communities of color. Because many times we come up with great programs, but those programs have side effects that really, really hurt these communities. And we really need to look back at our past and how we quote unquote messed up really big in the past so we don't do it again. What is it that we should have done in the past that we could do now? I think that when you talk about our immigrant communities, our communities of color, we have unmet needs, but we also have unlimited potential. I think that the economic future of America looks extremely bright if you can include the capacity of all these people that have come to bring so much more to this country. There's so much more that can happen in this country, so much more good, so many contributions that could be acknowledged and that could be, exponentially, that can bring exponential growth to this country. And I think that is by including them. I think that we don't move forward without including the grassroots, without including people. If I'm not in it, it's not for me. So if we want to do something for people, we need to include them, so we can truly understand what is it that they want and need and how we move forward from there.
Malika Burgos Flores from the Allapattah Collaborative, Brittany Morgan from the Miami Foundation, and Otis Rowley from Wells Fargo. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.